When Elon Musk sees an opportunity, he grabs it with both hands. The calm and collected billionaire has entered a new arena, space telescope. Is it time for SpaceX to begin scanning the night sky for a new world, new galaxies, or other life forms? Elon Musk recently talked about a giant telescope that would have 10 times the resolution power of NASA's Hubble Space Telescope. Stay tuned for the new SpaceX telescope. In a recent tweet on July 7th, Musk suggested that the ship itself could serve as, quote, the structure for a new giant telescope with 10 times the resolution of NASA's Hubble, an indication that the billionaire still has plenty of big ideas left for the company's spacecraft. The Hubble telescope is one of NASA's greatest achievements, and it's still operational to this day. Hubble's successor? According to Musk, the idea of turning Starship spacecraft into a massive space telescope was first suggested by Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory astrophysicist Saul Perlmutter. The news comes after NASA's aging Hubble Space Telescope had to put its scientific investigations on pause last month due to a software glitch. NASA scientists are now desperately looking for a fix to get the telescope back on track. In a previous tweet, Musk elaborated on his plans for the Mars-bound rocket to act as a, quote, dedicated deep space variant that can be refueled in orbit and could allow SpaceX to launch even heavier payloads to faraway destinations, including the Moon and Mars. Musk must be extremely confident that the Starship could be used to revolutionize astronomical observations because he's been discussing it with a Nobel Prize-winning astrophysicist. Elon Musk's latest comments on turning the SpaceX Starship into a structure that will harbor a giant space telescope adds to the growing list of functions that the Starship could potentially carry out once it's successfully launched. Elon Musk has even mentioned on several occasions that he plans to carry out all these plans before 2030, with hopes that the Starship would also be self-sustaining. SpaceX's Starship could carry the first astronauts to the surface of the Moon since Apollo's missions, clear up our planet's increasingly littered orbit, and perhaps even establish a city on Mars. And now, SpaceX CEO Elon Musk is saying that it could also be used to bring astronomical observations into the 21st century. A chart published by NASA's Launch Service Program today compared the performance of various rockets, SpaceX's Falcon Heavy among them. According to the numbers, an expendable version of SpaceX's Falcon Heavy, a heavy-lift variant of the company's workhorse Falcon 9 rocket, is capable of sending over 26,000 pounds all the way to Mars. Starship, however, could increase that number almost tenfold if its development goes according to plan. SpaceX still has plenty of work to do before the first Starship will go into orbit, let alone one that can turn itself into a giant telescope once there. The first prototype may make its first attempt to reach orbit in the coming weeks, with a planned splashdown in the Pacific off the coast of Hawaii. But once established as a stable platform, like its Falcon 9 predecessor, Starship has an opportunity to push the boundaries of astronomy by continuing Hubble's legacy in orbit. For months, astronomers have shared images online of the telescope's field of view with diagonal white streaks cutting across the darkness, the distinct appearance of Starlink satellites. More satellites are now on the way, both from SpaceX and other companies. If these satellites end up numbering in the tens of thousands, ignoring them would be difficult, whether you're an astronomer or not. In some ways, these satellites pose a familiar problem, a matter of managing the competing interests that scientists, commercial companies, and the public might have in a limited natural resource. But the use of outer space, particularly in close vicinity to another planet, has never been tested quite like this before. For most of history, scientists, particularly those who observe the cosmos on visible wavelengths, have had relatively little competition for access to the sky. Passing satellites were considered nuisances and sometimes wrecked data, but they were rare. Some astronomers are now calling for legal action, but even those who wouldn't push that far describe Starlink satellites as a wake-up call. The Starship would also have the ability to take up to 100 tons of cargo to the Red Planet. Once these Starships land on the planet, they could then be modified to construct Mars Base Alpha, which would be the first living quarters for a Martian settlement. Another version of the Starship could be lunar optimized for its missions to the Moon. One can only begin to imagine the sheer potential of astronomical discoveries that will be made once scientific instruments and a giant telescope are added to the mix. One final variant of the Starship would be geared towards deploying a gigantic satellite constellation as well as collecting space debris from any planet it visits. Once operational, the Starship would be the most powerful rocket on the planet, with the largest payload capacity compared to any other commercial rocket currently in operation. It is almost guaranteed to leave the Hubble telescope in the dust. The telescope would also have the ability to move super close to both near and far planets, which some of the most advanced space observatories have never done before. After all, this telescope would be hosted by Starship and would therefore have the ability to move in any direction at once. This modified Starship telescope would also have enough power to generate a beam of data back to SpaceX's mission control so that researchers can capture images in real time. However, this isn't the only telescope that plans to launch in the future. It's not even the only one that SpaceX is directly involved with. NASA also recently awarded SpaceX an additional cargo contract to construct and launch the spherex telescope. This telescope would be tasked with scanning the entire sky for groundbreaking observations over 2 years. However, it won't be operational until 2024. spherex will be part of NASA's medium-class Explorer program that includes several missions starting back from the early 19th century. The new telescope will be designed to map the sky in infrared to make amazing discoveries that are undetectable to the human eye. According to reports, the total cost of launching spherex would cost about $98.8 million, and it would be able to gather data on over 300 million galaxies and over 100 million stars in the Milky Way. This is thanks to its state-of-the-art spectrophotometer. In addition to this, there is also NASA's famous James Webb telescope, which is hopefully on its way later this year. This project would be 100 times more powerful than Hubble. The telescope has been in development since 1996 and was originally planned for a launch in 2007, but it had encountered various problems along the way. After all these years, the final budget is set at a whopping $10 billion, and it's more likely a bit more expensive than the SpaceX telescope. One of the goals of the James Webb telescope is to study the first star galaxies that formed after the Big Bang. In other words, it would observe the edge of the observable universe, and another one if its goal is to study the origin of life itself. The news of a proposed Starship telescope comes as NASA's aging Hubble telescope stopped its scientific investigations in June due to a software glitch. The software glitch was connected to the payload computer on the telescope itself. Despite Hubble's age and gradual decline, NASA's Space Telescope is still one of the most iconic technologies of the 20th century. It has given us a wonderful insight into the vastness of space and all it has to offer over the past 30 years. It is even predicted that the Hubble would continue to be operational for a few more years, making the groundbreaking observations that would undoubtedly improve our knowledge and understanding of the cosmos. Only time will tell what kind of discoveries these telescopes would make, but with all the achievements the Hubble telescope was able to do within the last 30 years, the future seems filled with endless opportunities. Let us know what you think about SpaceX's telescope by leaving a comment below.